Hi everyone, this is Jim Tolles, and today I want to talk about spiritual sexuality. I'm sure a bunch of you are already excited. It's like, yes, sex and spirituality combined! Woohoo! And it is fun. It's just a whole other way of approaching sexuality for most people. Most of sexuality operates in really two main ideas in this culture, which is either pleasurable, usually in a specific romantic way, or it's in the let's make a baby way. And so usually the pleasurable way is kind of mixed up with a whole bunch of cultural ideas about romance and passion and a lot of kind of ideas around this is what it should look like or this is what it should feel like. And usually people are bringing that mentality into the spiritual sexuality, which is why and it's usually in the context of a man and a woman and in the context of, let's make this feel as good as possible. And so how can spirituality make me do this? And it's not that spiritual sexuality won't make it incredibly rewarding to be with a partner, but sexuality is much broader, and it's much broader than just the man-woman context. There's all sorts of wonderful, loving relationships you can have with yourself and others. And I think the first part that I always start people is with yourself. So much of what you learn on the spiritual path is your joy and your pleasure and your bliss is within. And this is probably one of the hardest ideas for anybody to really move into with the sexuality piece, because they see so much of like sexuality as an approach of with coming into contact with another, coming to deep union with another. And that's a beautiful thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But most of the endorphins and all the chemicals and stuff that release, that open, and that orgasmic energy, that's you. That's you, and your partner in many respects, once again, like much of everything else in the spiritual path is just an excuse for you to open deeply within you. So this is why spiritual sexuality, one of the first steps I always encourage people towards, is to develop their own practice. Unfortunately, masturbation has become a dirty word in this culture, and its etymology isn't very nice, and I believe it has to do with shaming oneself. So that's why you'll hear me say different things like your personal spiritual sexual practice, which is a long set of phrases, but it gets the point across that this is coming with a different intention as opposed to just getting yours or getting a feeling. And with spiritual sexuality, what we're doing is we're bringing more intention, more mindfulness to the whole of the body, the whole of the energy, not just the genitalia. And so in being able to appreciate all of our body as a sexual organism, we open up more of that energy. And this is where a lot of people, will notice like there's some overlap with the Kundalini yoga and spiritual sexuality, because this sexuality is moving that Kundalini energy. And they really kind of fit nicely together if you're building a practice between your Kundalini yoga practice, where you could do that first, and then you could do a spiritual sexual practice and have all that energy opened up. And then it's just kind of learning how to move the cycles of energy within you. The big piece for men is, creating a divorce between ejaculation and orgasm, which is completely possible and completely wonderful. And if you fail at it, it's still completely wonderful as you're learning. That's one of the great things about that part. It's like, it doesn't matter if you fail. It's like, well, damn, that felt really good. It wasn't what I was expecting, but I'll come back to figuring that out later. And usually it's about relaxing. And so you have to get to know yourself, and when you're about to ejaculate and relax out of it, and you drop into orgasm. The more you practice that, the easier it gets. And then that gives you a way to have that energy just moving. And you can have multiple orgasms if you want. And learn what your orgasmic threshold is, how many orgasms do you like to have, as well as how that energy moves. And that's the big piece. Okay, so I like to work people up to that, depending on if you're working with issues that you're trying to heal sexually. This type of work starts with just being mindful of the body. It doesn't necessarily go into orgasm, depending on what's going on for you. Just being mindful in and of itself is teaching the body that you love it. And if you've had sexual trauma or any sort of physical trauma, the body needs to be reminded that you love it. Because generally speaking, what happens after trauma is that it gets built in the mind that the body is dirty or bad or evil, or you're avoiding it in some way, or you're trying to mask feelings that don't feel good. And we're going to be uncovering them. Because the depth of the orgasmic releases that you can go into, the energy you can cycle, are going to be built off of openness. You can't be closed anywhere. And a lot of times with the orgasmic energy, it's going to show you where you're stuck. And that's really, really powerful. It's powerful learning because then you just start to breathe into it, start to relax into it, and start to notice where you're stuck in your body. It's just something I've done for some time where I can kind of notice, like, is it stuck in my hips right now? Did it move halfway up my back? And it's practice. So you just start to practice. Okay, so where did it go? Or did it just roll all the way through and start going around? And I like to use the breath to kind of continue that cycle. It's a little bit of visualization where I'm breathing into it to continue the swell and relaxing it and visualizing it kind of going up and down. And for those of you who are really sensitive to energy, it'll be really easy. And the great thing about orgasmic energy is it really is your own. So it's not ethereal or it's not some sort of visualized idea. Like, you feel it. You know your orgasmic energy. So these are some things that you can start to do and start to pay attention to in building a spiritual sexual practice. And as I said, I really encourage you to start with yourself. Know your own space. And depending on how much healing or how many issues come up, depending on where you are in your spiritual path, if you're in awakening, a lot of things can be moving up. And that's why getting to know your own space is more important than jumping into bed with somebody else. And with moving into that space, a lot of intentions, a lot of work has to be built up. If this is something you're going to share with somebody else, you're both going to start to learn how to move your energies together and apart, and the things that may arise, because now you're kind of magnifying the amount of energy that's going through both of you. And that can bring up more issues. So for some people, a profound spiritual sexual practice could end up having one or both people just crying. And it may not feel pleasurable in the normal sense of what we think of pleasure. So you can see how, like, the definition has to get broader. And then if lots of things are coming up, sometimes, a partner can't deal with it in that moment. That's okay. And so this person, your partner or you have to be committed to stepping out, going back into your own sexual practice, going into your journal, into your meditation, to doing these things, to take a look and say, okay, so I was really expanding. I was going to this wonderful place with my partner, and then I stopped. I held back. I got scared. I got angry. All these things can come up, and you can't mask them. And so you have to do this work, and then you have to come back to your partner and say, this is what happened for me, right? And then your partner's holding a loving space to hear this. And they may get activated. It really depends on what's going on. If they get activated, then they have to step back out if they can't handle it, and talking to their partner to say, well, what happened here? Those are just words that my partner's sharing, and so why am I getting upset? What's here for me? And as you do this and you combine this, this shared work, then you can create some amazing spaces of union and intimacy within yourself and within a partner. And that's a profound thing. So this really isn't just kind of a new Kama Sutra position to titillate yourself with. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I'm not degrading it at all. All I'm doing is setting an intention on what spiritual sexuality is, the breadth of it, what it can include, and that there's a lot more than just pleasure at work. There's deep healing, there's deep connection, and there's even awakening that can arise depending on the energy and depending on the moment. So these are some thoughts, I encourage you to kind of look into and inquire within as you're discovering more about spiritual sexuality. And of course, you can always find out more about what I'm talking about at spiritualawakeningprocess.com. Once again, my name is Jim Tolles, and I hope you're having a beautiful day.